Merry Christmas, everybody. Hope you're all having a great day. And today seemed like the best day to rank all of the Doctor Who festive specials. Now, by festive specials, what I mean are the Christmas specials and the New Year ones. I know a case could be made for Planet of the Dead and Legend of the Sea Devils being Easter specials, and Easter being festive. I really just mean the Christmas and the New Year ones. So, no Planet of the Dead, no Waters of Mars, no Day of the Doctor, Spy 4 was a season premiere rather than a special, no Legend of the Sea Devils, no Pair of the Doctor, no Star Beast, no Wild Blue Yonder, no Giggle, and no Church on Ruby Road, because that's on later today and no one's seen it yet. And the end of time is one story, so I'm really counting that as one rather than two specials. So, with all of that out of the way, let's get into it. Now, I was surprised by some of the placings on this list. I've never really decided to rank the Doctor Who Christmas/New Year specials before. So I've never really considered what I think of them in relation to each other. And I always think that they stand a little bit apart from the rest of Doctor Who anyway. Some of them do. The necessary nature of them being fairly lightweight, family friendly, that kind of like being a little bit sozzled on Christmas Day and sitting down in a fuzzy state to watch a kind of bit of Doctor Who madness. I've had a great time watching a lot of them, but they never bother my top tier Doctor Who stories. Except for one, so obviously its placing here will be no surprise. But some of them, I have to say, when I put these together, I'm surprised that I like some of them more than others. I'll try and talk my way through my reasoning as we go through. So, number 16. The Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe. It feels like this one gets beaten up quite a bit by fans. I know that there are some that like fervent, like they ardently love it. I would like to be one of those people. Now, there are things that I do enjoy here. I think what ties really nicely into a Christmas special is that nature of grief and Madge having to break the news of their father's death to her children. That all ties in really well, but I could do without the Narnia stuff. I feel like the Wooden King and Queen are fairly undercooked. I find Bill Bailey and Arabella Weir a fun presence while they're there, but it doesn't feel... I don't know, it just all feels like lots of things all mashed together. And sometimes that can work for a Christmas special. And then after all of that, like going that way, responding to certain things, but never really... being allowed to fully explore them. And then all of a sudden he goes and sees Amy and Rory. Nice to see them again. That is a nice scene at the end. I don't know, all of this feels like it never really coalesced, and I think as much as it pains me to say it, because I don't like disliking any Doctor Who, this is an episode of Doctor Who I think I would say I don't like. Number 15. The Return of Dr Mysterio. Another one. I'm surprised that this one's fairly low, because I remember watching it for the first time, it passing by fairly breezily, and me thinking, okay, Doctor Who Christmas special over. But we'd waited, I think, a whole year for it, and there was that sort of like tinge of disappointment because of that. There'd been no series in 2016. It had been a gap year essentially, and I feel like had that been, I think because the previous gap year had been plugged by the Planet of the Dead, Waters of Mars. I think this time there was like it was the longest drought we'd had since the Wilderness years, and the Return of Dr Mysterio, while okay, didn't feel like the fantastic comeback it could have been. Some great characters. The squeaky toy scene, I like that. I did really like the Doctor showing up eating sushi. That Peter Capaldi was fantastic in that scene. So again, while there are elements to like here, I think it falls quite low because this one kind of lives or dies on the Doctor Who doing a superhero trope, and I don't mind superhero films. I really like some of them. There is a case to be made for us having superhero fatigue by this point. By that point in 2016, I think it was legitimate exercise to try. I mean, Civil War, Captain America Civil War had just come out. Marvel was riding very, very high. Why shouldn't Doctor Who give it a go? And I don't think it works. I think there is some effort put in to sort of like give it a Doctor Who-y explanation as to why he has superpowers. I don't much like the idea of a superhero roaming around the Doctor Who universe, certainly on Earth, which is sort of meant to be a domain that's entirely vulnerable if it weren't for the Doctor occasionally. So I don't know. I just think, much like the Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe, I feel like the Return of Dr Mysterio never really fully comes together. Number 14. The Husbands of River's Song. And now, again, I know that there are people that love this. It is the 12th Doctor and River's only episode together. Alex Kingston and Peter Capaldi are really, really good together. And I think at this point on the list, we're out of the I don't like it territory. I do like the Husbands of River's Song. There are elements to Stephen Moffat Christmas specials. Some of them he can do really well. We'll see that later on. But then sometimes when he leans into his sitcom tendencies, they're sort of like magnified in the Christmas specials. And sometimes it can work and sometimes it can't. And the Husbands of River Song succeeds when it's not doing that. So I don't really enjoy Nardole here. I'll enjoy Nardole a little bit more in series 10. Here, I'm not super keen. Greg Davis he does a really good job as King Hydroflax, but again, I don't really respond positively to the character. I think this, again, in the same way that the Return of Dr Mysterio kind of pivots on one point, that being the superhero trope, this one is like it rests solely on the Doctor and River, and because they are good together, and it's nice that Capaldi got a River episode, it's nice that River Song got to meet the 12th Doctor. I like that he's turned up wearing a face that she doesn't know. That puts her on the back foot rather than the Doctor being on the back foot in Science in the Library. That's a nice bookend. It's really sweet when they're on Beryllium. There's again, in the same way with the two previous ones on this list, there's too many other things that stop it coalescing into a really satisfying whole. However, it is a step up, in my opinion, from the Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe and the Return of Dr Mysterio. Number 13. Revolution of the Daleks. I might have said before, and I rarely get to talk about Chibnall episodes on this channel just yet. That era had already finished when I started the channel, and I haven't got to those stories yet on the marathon. But regular viewers will know that when the Chibnall era does come up, I tend to defend it more than most. I liked it more than most. I know it didn't get a lot of love. Revolution of the Daleks, I think, started off quite well, and while I never had a huge yearning to see Captain Jack again. The connective tissue of Doctor Who's past, when it comes back into the present, when that's used judiciously, I really respond to it. So I did actually quite like, regardless of my opinions of Barrowman, I did quite like Captain Jack, a figure from the Doctor's past coming to meet the current Doctor, the 13th Doctor. So the 13th Doctor and Captain Jack, I like that. I think the weaving of the previous Dalek special resolution into this and how the Daleks then are manifesting themselves on Earth Also, I quite like the design of what is it called, the reconnaissance scout Dalek. I like that design, so seeing that again was good. Harriet Walters is in this. Bringing back Chris Noth. Again, opinions about the man aside, he's a good enough character to bring back in this capacity. But it falls off a cliff, and whereas I think the Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe, Return of Dr Mysterio, and the Husbands of River Song were all consistent, and they followed their own consistency. There was just too many things there for me to actually think it coalesced. Revolution of the Daleks is, for me, a game of two halves, which is, it's really strong up until a point, and then it's not, and it just feels like two cars just welded together. And so while I feel the departure of Graham and Ryan is handled nicely, it pays due care and attention to their relationship and it ending up in a really nice place. I do like that. I also like Yaz's borderline obsession with the Doctor coming back, the Doctor being late. Feel like more could have been made of the Doctor being that late. And it's when all of this starts happening and they all start coming together that you realise Captain Jack becomes an extra body when there's no, like, there's a lot of, like, it's the crowded TARDIS syndrome again. There's lots of characters at the end that all have to be parked somewhere. And even though that is the case, I am quite fond of the idea of the bad guy getting away with it, because as we're seeing in the real world, the bad guys are getting away with it. Number 12. Twice Upon a Time. It's a Stephen Moffat Christmas special, and so, like the previous ones on this list, I do feel like it rests on one thing, and whether or not you love it or hate it depends on that one thing. And in this case, it's the First Doctor. So I don't mind David Bradley's performance as the First Doctor. Obviously, it's no Hartnell. I know that. But I don't automatically dislike David Bradley's First Doctor because of it, and I know that there are many people that are really can't get on with how Stephen Moffat writes the First Doctor here, and I can sympathise. Twice Upon a Time is okay. However, again, a lot like the other previous ones on the list, you've then got the glass thing, and it brings back Bill in a really, I feel like, an inelegant way. It's nice that the Doctor can remember Clara going forward, because I feel like that might be the sort of thing that subsequent showrunners might have forgotten about if they were, like, do you know what I mean? Like, years from now they could have referenced Clara, and if Stephen Moffat hadn't given the Doctor his memories back of Clara, we'd be like, hang on a minute. It's that sort of thing. Because, to be honest with you, the Doctor forgetting Clara, that's a whole other thing when I get to it. But it's the sort of thing that could have been glossed over. So by giving the Doctor the memories back of Clara, again, it's just done in a really sort of, like, I feel like, clunky way. One of the most enduring images, I think, of Christmas of the 20th century is when they stopped during the war, First World War, and played football. And I feel like if Doctor Who was going to do a story about that, oh, how good could it have been? How good would that have been? But here, it's just like, it's almost like, it's just like a coda to this story about this glass robot and the good Dalek at the end of it. I don't, again, like the Husbands of River Song, like Return of Dr Mysterio, and like the Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe, too many things are thrown at this. A Christmas story set in World War One. Still have, if you want, the Briggs ancestor. Still have, if you want, the First Doctor. But have it so that I just feel like it could have been utterly beautiful, rather than, I mean, what it was, which was jokes about browser histories and smacked arses. Number 11, the Snowman. A distinct step up for me from the previous years, the Doctor, Widow and the Wardrobe. I thought Jenna Coleman made a great impression straight away with Clara. I think Victorian Clara, I still probably would have preferred for her to travel with the Doctor full time, but it kind of gives this episode a sort of like standalone status. The TARDIS on the cloud is a nice visual. I could do without sort of like the ladder coming down, but I enjoy the idea of the Doctor sulking. The Paternoster gang. This was the episode that kind of consolidated them as being able to work going forward. I know that sort of like Strax died, and then there was a minisode bringing him back to life. But do you know what? Strax is so much fun here. The memory worm. There's a lot going on here where I think it works in a better way than the previous Christmas specials on this list, because there's an element of fun that sees it through. And I think maybe Moffat might be re-energized by introducing a new companion, and as a result, I feel like the internal consistency as a through line works. I've just done the 2 Great Intelligence Second Doctor stories on my marathon, and I said in those that I can understand why the Great Intelligence was brought back without the Yeti. And while I'm not disparaging about the Yeti. I don't feel like they work as scary monsters. They're still better than the Snowmen here. I'm sorry, they are. I don't much care for the Doctor kind of forgetting about like his previous encounters with them, when he can remember, like sometimes he can remember a single human that he met once centuries ago, but this massive, huge foe that he was always waiting for a rematch with, if the end of the Web of Fear is anything to go by, I don't buy that he doesn't remember it. But those are nitpicks. Otherwise, I think this episode is, we're now into I like it territory, which is good going. I mean, this is number 11 out of 16, so from here on in, I like them. Number 10, The Runaway Bride. The Doctor Who's second Christmas special, and it was a disorientating watch on first viewing in 2006, because Billie Piper had sort of like cast such a shadow. She was one of the primary reasons, I would say, that Doctor Who was that successful, and since it had come back, she was the the consistent presence. Series 1, Series 2, then she'd left. We were going to see. This was the first post-Rose episode, and that sounds daft because now we've had companions changing all the time. This really could have not broken the show, because David Tennant was also very popular by this point. But what it could have done was it could have made a lot of people go, not for me. So Catherine Tate coming in and being so utterly different from Rose. Donna was so different from Rose, and by ringing the changes in that regard, this whole new dynamic kind of gives the show a kick up the arse. And David Tennant too. David Tennant now is, when he took over, Billie Piper was a holdover from Eccleston's series. This is Tennant's show now, and he leads it really, really well. There's some goofiness in here that I, have to sort of like tut at a little bit, as I do with not just a lot of Doctor Who Christmas specials, sometimes a lot of Doctor Who. But The Runaway Bride is just like quite strong from start to finish. Okay, it's a shame that the Rachnos can't be scuttling around, but what do you expect? Let's be realistic. Obviously, the Queen of the Rachnos just stays still because she has to. But Sarah Parish, she chews the scenery in this. She's having a great time. I've never really bought Lance being her henchman, but that's really the only thing that I kind of like scratch my head at. Oh, I know. I don't like the pilot fish of the Santa robots being controlled by her either. That doesn't make any sense to me. But otherwise, this is sort of like a fairly I think it's a run-of-the-mill episode of Doctor Who, but we're talking about Christmas specials. And for that sort of like balminess, 60-minute shot of festive Doctor Who, it does a great job. Number 9, Eve of the Daleks. Yeah, I know that this is cited as probably maybe Chibnall's best festive special, but I was surprised as well because I thought it was mine as well, but then when I've actually come down to think about it turns out I'm not going to tell you where it is on the list just yet, but it turns out I prefer Resolution, I know. But Eve of the Daleks, again, in the same way that The Runaway Bride has, just sort of like, it's very strongly consistent from start to finish, it's very easy to follow, there's not too many things thrown at it. The same is true here. Eve of the Daleks has got the very simple premise of the time loop, and it gets shorter each time, and they have to avoid being shot by Daleks and get out of it. There's a lot of fun here running around the story. It's a very limited setting. It feels like a bottle episode, which is a brave move for what Doctor Who was known for, which is like big festive episodes. I mean, the difference between this and Voyage of the Damned is like chalk and cheese. Voyage of the Damned is this huge epic. Era of the Daleks takes place in a self-storage unit, and you know what? Some people might use that to ding it, but I that's something I really like. Aisling B is so good. The relationship between Dan and Yaz by this point is working really well. I like the Dan Yaz Jodie dynamic, maybe more than the Jodie Yaz Ryan and Graham one, which isn't to say I prefer Dan to those characters. I don't know. I'm not going to go into detail about this era just yet because it's a mile off for me on the marathon. I just think Eve of the Daleks sets out its stall, tells you what it's selling, and there's no hidden surprises or even disappointments. I think Eve of the Daleks is a solid episode of Doctor Who and a very strong festive episode. Number 8, Voyage of the Damned. See what I was just talking about the chalk and cheese thing? Yeah, I think I prefer Voyage of the Damned. Voyage of the Damned is one of the ones that would... And do you know what, actually? There are things in there that really annoy me, and there's probably more in Voyage of the Damned that annoys me than there is in Eve of the Daleks. But why is it higher? Well, this is a ranking of festive specials, and I think Voyage of the Damned is so successful as an episode of Doctor Who at Christmas that you can't argue with it. I mean, like, a Space Titanic, it's bonkers. A Space Titanic, Banaka Falata, The Host, the glinting tooth being done for real as opposed to on the video. Don't like that gag. I don't really like the imagery of the Doctor being taken up by angels. I don't like the Queen in it, but the episode has set itself out to be so balmy anyway that it kind of works as, like, it doesn't take me out of it. Do you know what I mean? It might make me go, oh, typical, but it doesn't make me go, this has jumped the shark, because it's nuts from the beginning. And again, like, you have to take into consideration, I think, that an episode of Doctor Who at Christmas is where you're sort of like watching it in a fairly fuzzy state. Voyage of the Damned does exactly like Eve of the Daleks, sets out its stall, tells you what it's selling, and then delivers on it. Voyage of the Damned does exactly the same. If I'm in the mood for a bit of fun, balmy Doctor Who festiveness, and I only had 2 choices, Eve of the Daleks and Voyage of the Damned, I'm going for Voyage of the Damned. That's why it's higher. Number 7, The End of Time. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm counting this the 2 episodes as one. It's one story. They both aired over the festive period. Therefore, The End of Time, I'm going to count it as one. I really approved of the sort of like almost funeral march feel of The End of Time Part 1, with some caveats. So the cliffhanger is so drawn out with the Master just laughing as all these people. It's like, okay, yeah, no, we get it. And then the rug's pulled from under you with the reveal of the Time Lords, which is superb. But yeah, the repetition of the Master just sort of like, yeah, okay, we get it. Everybody on the planet is the Master now. And there's some really clunky really clunky first drafty dialogue between Wilf and the woman. Sort of things like, "Oh, I think I'm lost, and yet you are found." It is said, that's said a lot as well. It is said that there's no such thing as coincidence. It is said that blah blah blah, and that wore on me a little bit. But the overall tone of this being this totemic Doctor's final story, there's a weight given to that, and so I think that carries it through. I like that it makes time for new guest stars as well. David Harewood, Sinead Keenan, I think it's Sinead Keenan, as the Vin Voce. They work, and they sort of like add a little bit more sort of like newness to the victory lap, I guess, of the 10th Doctor. And on victory laps, I feel like that is drawn out. I feel like a visit to Rose would have sufficed. But overall, the end of time, when I was watching it that Christmas and that New Year, there was a huge excitement about, for me anyway, of a regeneration impending. There always is. And the end of time, I feel like, on the whole, while yes, I've got problems with it, it kind of delivered on that as a festive special. Number 6, Resolution. Yeah, I've got that higher than the end of time and Voyage of the Damned, guys. Again, that surprised me. Now, it isn't because I thought, oh, I dislike Resolution, I'm surprised it's this high. It's not that. It's that I'm surprised that when I'm relating it to the other festive specials, that I do think it's this high. I think a lot of it is Charlotte Ritchie. I think her performance is very, very good. I think doing something different with the Daleks really helps their return to the show feel kind of earned rather than just brought back for the sake of it. Like I said a little bit earlier on, the design of the reconnaissance scout Dalek I like as a redesign of the Daleks. It's infinitely more successful than the new paradigm Daleks in Victory of the Daleks, in my opinion. And so this was after and again, I didn't dislike Series 11. I had problems with it, like a lot of people did. I think I prefer it to most people. I think, or certainly, I'm more forgiving of it. That said, to have a shot of Doctor Who history, as in the Daleks, I liked that. After a series of no returning enemies, no returning characters, to have the 13th Doctor facing off against the Daleks, I liked that. And also the scene between them, I did enjoy. Less keen on, not necessarily actually on the idea of Ryan's dad showing up, but more how it's sort of handled within it. I feel like I feel like it's crowbarred in. Whereas without that, I feel like it would have been a very streamlined, slick episode. As a story of Doctor Who, I like it. And now I think what this means is, because while with the end of time I do have problems with it as a Doctor Who story, as a festive special, I rate it quite highly, considering I think we're now in the area of these are also what I consider to be good Doctor Who stories. Number 5, The Time of the Doctor. Yeah, okay, I know that people don't like this one either. I love the 11th Doctor. I love Matt Smith as the 11th Doctor. And sometimes I feel like he was let down with some certain stories, certain plot lines, which all come messily together here with the crack showing up, all of the villains, the silence, the TARDIS blowing up, all of that. They don't tie up as neatly as I would have liked, and it feels like this is a rushed end to an era. But I feel like Matt Smith does tie it together super well. There's goofiness that makes you cringe, like the nakedness on Christmas Day. But Matt Smith is, I feel, such a good performer that he does just about sell it for me. And that's not to say that it's his failing. It isn't. It's his success. And I do, again, in terms, it's another regeneration. I was less happy to see Smith go than I was Tennant. I feel like Smith still had more in the tank to give. So there was that sort of feeling of, we're about to say goodbye to the 11th Doctor. That was quite emotional. which Smith sells really well. And it's added to by the fact that the Doctor ages on Trenzalore, and I love the idea that he won't go. I like that very much, and that he ages there and he saves, he sort of like protects the town. It's not an idea I think everybody likes, but I do really like it, and it makes sense for it to be the 11th Doctor. And this idea that he's in his final incarnation, which if Moffat was going to do that, I wish there'd have been more foreshadowing. That was the first confirmation that the Meta-Crisis counted as a regeneration. So rather than the 11th Doctor being the 12th, turns out he's the 13th, after the War Doctor. If we'd have known about the Meta-Crisis counting, I feel like this could have been built up to a little bit more gracefully, but I understand that these things sort of like change in the writing, and then Moffat was like, oh, I could count the Meta-Crisis. So I like that the 11th Doctor goes out more triumphantly than the 10th did. It's a massive change from I don't want to go, which I really I approve of that. I like that the 11th Doctor is more stoic, especially as he did think he was going to die. Remember, he didn't think that he had any more regenerations left. Again, that would have carried so much more weight if we'd have known that before it's just dropped in. But you know, again, I think that's a nitpick. I think the time of the Doctor actually feels like a whole series of Doctor Who condensed into one episode, and that is could be a drawback. And it kind of is in the quality of how these story threads are tied up. But as an episode of Doctor Who, it's almost like a concept album, and I do have a soft spot for it. Number 4, The Next Doctor. When this aired, I thought it was easily the weakest of all of the Christmas specials so far. It felt so sort of throwaway and disposable compared to the other ones. Over time, I've realised how wrong I was about that. I feel like The Next Doctor is such a fun story, and I didn't fully appreciate that the idea that he's not the next Doctor. I wasn't disappointed that he wasn't, because I kind of thought he wasn't going to be, especially as it just didn't feel like that's how they'd announced the next Doctor. It kind of like I knew that there were some shenanigans afoot. The reveal that he wasn't, when I first watched it, I was like, oh, obviously. But it's actually a really heartbreaking twist. So now I've unburdened myself of the expectations and the kind of like, yeah, I knew he wasn't going to be the next Doctor. Without all of that hype surrounding the episode, he thinks he's the Doctor because he desperately wants to be, because his reality is so much more heartbreaking. My God, that's so good. And David Morrissey knocks it out of the park. Rosita, excellent character. The whole thing I could buy as the Doctor and companion. And then the little sort of like clues along the way that he isn't, that the Doctor picks up on, is all really good. It's also worth remembering that the Return of the Cybermen was quite a big deal as well, because the Daleks felt like they came back every year. We hadn't seen the Cybermen since Series 2. This was a good exercise in building hype for a strong episode of Doctor Who, and this is, like I said, this is where we are in this at this point in the list. We're into strong episodes of Doctor Who as well as festive specials. As a festive special, this more than succeeds as well. The idea of I like that it sort of like taps into the Dickensian vibe, the workhouse, Victorian Christmas. It's really, it's got that start to finish, A to B, through line consistency, solid. And I don't think it drops the ball. It doesn't throw too many ingredients at it. It's got a suitably large finale with the Cyber King, which might be a bit silly, but like I said, it's a Doctor Who festive special. And because it's been so good up until that point, I feel like it's earned it. Number 3, Last Christmas. Another one that's grown on me over time. The idea of elves and Santa Claus being in it did make me, worry a little bit. But then the idea of the dream crabs and this one has such a strong supporting cast, most especially Faye Maze as Shona. There's a list as Doctor Who fans I think that we all make when we watch Doctor Who, and some of this is universal. Some of the people on the list are universal, of like the best companions we never had, like Rita from the God Complex. Shona from Last Christmas is the top of mine. That we didn't get more of her is so upsetting, but it's obvious. Shona's story had to end with her to-do list with "Forgive Dave?" ? Oh my god! When Doctor Who throws characters like this in, it's like a snapshot of a real person just dropped into Doctor Who, and that's what we all want to be. Wouldn't it be great if we found ourselves in Doctor Who? Now, we don't have to have the same life as Shona, we don't have to have the same experiences as Shona, but we all know a Shona. And there she is, on screen, in this batshit episode of Doctor Who with Santa Claus dream crabs on the North Pole. Excellent. Number 2, The Christmas Invasion. As somebody who's not a huge fan of the 10th Doctor, as somebody who's not a huge fan... Oh. TARDIS has gone out. I have to change the batteries. As somebody who's not a huge fan of that first Russell T Davies era, The Christmas Invasion, I think, is easily one of the strongest new Doctor stories. It was interesting to see how the new show was going to do that. It had a regeneration earlier than any of us expected when Christopher Eccleston left. David Tennant comes in, and now it gets to do that new Doctor story through a 21st century lens. And I feel like it more than succeeds at it. The 10th Doctor doesn't have much to do in this episode, and that's what really makes it work. And his impact at the end is felt because it's like a very energetic performance from Tennant. But the episode has really missed the Doctor up until this point. And the little things like the TARDIS translation circuit's not working, which means they have to try and decipher the Sycorax themselves. Rose kind of stepping up in that, like, I'm terrified but going to kind of way. There's a lot going on here. And because the Doctor is so keenly missed, when those doors open... There's a reason that it's that iconic line and moment, "Did you miss me?" It's one of the best moments in all of Doctor Who. And I say that as somebody who the 10th Doctor isn't a favourite Doctor. But the Christmas Invasion set the template kind of for Doctor Who Christmas specials. And by being, and let's not count, we can count the Feast of Stephen if you want, it's not on this list. But, because it's just an episode, it's not a special. But with the Christmas Invasion being the first Doctor Who Christmas special, it's still one of the best. Clearly, it's at number 2 on this list. Which means there's only one more. And you can probably tell which one it is because it hasn't shown up yet. Number 1. A Christmas Carol. Right at the beginning of this video, I said that there was at least one that I think is a superlative Doctor Who story. Now, while I said from about Resolution onwards, Resolution, Time of the Doctor, Next Doctor... Last Christmas and The Christmas Invasion, they're all good stories. But I think this one, A Christmas Carol, is the only one that I would term, outside of the festive trappings, a great story. There are issues people have, I think, with the Doctor just willy-nilly rewriting a person's timeline. I can appreciate those. I don't think I share them though, because the Doctor has always had to sometimes look at the bigger picture. And I think that's why I respond to the 11th Doctor as much as I do, because yeah, he's the wacky, silliest of all of the new series Doctors. 2005 onwards. I'm saying that without having actually fully watched any Shooter yet, apart from the last 15 minutes or so of the giggle. So I don't know what he's going to be like. But Matt Smith, I think, is known as the wackiest, silliest one. But there's darkness there. Because it's light and shade, it makes that darkness feel even more dark. He's masking. And with the 7th Doctor as well, being sort of like fairly impish and mischievous, playing the spoons, gurning outwardly, but being this dark manipulator. That's why I think A Christmas Carol works, because the Doctor, to save all of those people on that ship, if he has to, he's gonna do this, and it beats killing him. because the Doctor doesn't want to do that either, even though he does kill Solomon later on. But forget about that. A Christmas Carol is like so neatly woven. I think it then, for some reason, yeah. So you've even got like sort of like little vignettes of hopping over to a party with Marilyn Monroe. That's part of Kazran and is it Abigail? Abigail and Kazran's story. So that feels germane. It's got flying sky sharks. So it's got the balminess that you'd expect of a Doctor Who Christmas special, sitting there sort of like soaked in sherry, watching some nuttiness. But that's all part of it as well, with the half of the screwdriver. Like and then they're used to help guide the ship down. It all ties together in a way that most festive episodes don't. I think this one holds up as a really, truly great Doctor Who story, more so than any other festive episode of Doctor Who. So therefore, I think it's the best story on this list. But why do I think it's the best festive special? Yeah, that's part of it. It's the best story, but also it doesn't forget about all of those festive trappings. It's even got the sort of like Dickensian feel to it as well, which always works for a Christmas special. It's got great performances from Catherine Jenkins, Michael Gambon. Amy and Rory are sort of like fairly sidelined, but that's okay because it gives the Doctor a chance to focus on how he's going to save them. And being a time traveller, he's got no time and all of the time to do it in. I just really like how well this one is put together. Great festive episode. Great episode. So that's my ranking of Doctor Who festive specials for Christmas Day. What do you think? Do you share any of the opinions? I don't know. Let me know in the comments below. As ever, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Christmas Day. I hope you really enjoy The Church on Ruby Road. I'm going to be watching that later on. And my video digesting The Church on Ruby Road will hopefully go up on Boxing Day, maybe the day after. And there'll also be a change of setting as well. I'm going up to my parents for Christmas. So for one time only, there'll be a different background. Imagine that. So enjoy the rest of your Christmas. If you haven't yet, please do like this video, share it around. Every share helps, every like helps. I would be super grateful. And please do hit the subscribe button, clang the cloister bell, and I will see you soon.